How is the feedback morning program?
Very good.
Okay.
So good numbers we are getting.
Exactly. So how people just come to the exhibition, they come in or?
No, they come to the conference room, conference hall. We are also promoting the conference separately. No?
Oh, great. Okay. So how many people were there this morning?
This morning we had approximately 225 people approximately.
My God. Okay. Almost unknown countries also.
Yes. That detail we'll be able to give later, but yes, they are.
Fantastic. I think so. Quite a successful.
Yeah, and in the exhibition today, since morning, we have had approximately 1,900 people.
My God. So there was no technical hiccup so far.
No.
Okay.
Sir, we are live. If we can start.
Okay.
So good afternoon, friends. Welcome back to this very important session. So we will be now organizing a session on inventory optimization through Ddmrp systems. We have with us very eminent panelists today who are very well known in the industry for their consulting and advice. So let me straight away get into by introducing our main panelists. So we have Mr. N.C. Narayan. He is the founder chairman of SSA Group of Companies. Although he doesn't require introduction because everyone in the industry now knows him very well, but for the sake of record, I have to give his introduction. So Mr. N.C. Narayan is the founder chairman of SSA Group of Companies. After 3 decades of corporate leadership career, NC founded SSA in 1999 with a missionary zeal to transform Indian industries to become globally competitive by transforming the way in which they think and act. In the last 2 decades, NC's passion for excellence spread across many global companies with the same intensity as India. NC has authored many books on organizational transformation. Some of his popular books are Enigma of Lean, Lean Six Sigma in a Nutshell, and Statistical Guide for Six Sigma. McGraw-Hill Education has published his latest book, Pragmatic Leadership, in which he deals with a systematic approach to mastering leadership through personal leadership, team leadership, and organizational leadership. He has been conferred with several awards in recognition of his contribution to the field of quality and business excellence. He is the revered speaker and regularly chairs various international conferences. And he's also a gold medalist in mechanical engineering from Anna University and holds an MS research in computer-aided design from the prestigious IIT Madras. So welcome, NC. Our next panelist is Mr. Ganesh Iyer. He is Vice Chairman, SSA Business Solutions. Ganesh is a graduate in chemical engineering from Mumbai University with leadership management program for NCET France. He has over 20 years of industrial experience spanning across diverse sectors and last 10 years in business process consulting for strategy, operations, design, and development. He is a certified project management professional involved in a wide variety of technical and business engagements in the field of manufacturing, services, business application systems. Since 2011, Ganesh has intensively worked on understanding and creating the design excellence model to help R&D functions bring continuous improvement and improve time to market. He has worked with numerous organizations institutionalizing design for Six Sigma, design failure mode effect analysis, design for manufacturer and assembly, value analysis, value engineering, and other improvement methodologies. He also has wide logistic consulting experience in India and Southeast Asia, where he was a deployment manager for business excellence and change management, integrating continuous improvement into their strategy to make it a way of life. So, welcome, Ganesh. We also have a very eminent speaker, Mr. Naveen Narayan. He is the managing director, SSA International. Naveen is a mechanical engineer with an MBA in international business from prestigious Thunderbird School of Global Management, US, where he was inducted to the Beta Gamma Sigma Honor Society for his academic excellence. He also holds a master's degree with distinction in lean enterprise from University of Buckingham, UK. He is a certified Six Sigma Black Belt and Quality Improvement Associate from the American Society for Quality and is a certified EFQM assessor. He is currently pursuing his doctoral research in lean operational excellence from the University of Buckingham. Naveen has over 15 years of global management consulting experience in the world of lean manufacturing, strategy, and change management. He has led several corporate wide transformation programs, mentored change agents, and produced sustainable business results for clients such as Pfizer Pharmaceutical, Nortel Networks, DHL Worldwide, and Godrej Industries throughout Asia Pacific, Middle East, and Africa. And we are very, very, thankful for him that he is there in the panel. He is one of our very, very important speakers today. And then finally, we have Mr. Vijay Donde. He is the CEO of SSA Business Solutions Asia Pacific. Vijay is a mechanical engineer from Mumbai University with over 20 years of experience in transformation, consulting, applying strategy cost management. His work experience includes corporates such as Reliance Industries and Godrej Aerospace, division of Godrej and Boyce. Holds various positions in the field of quality, right from operating with hands-on experience to leadership. He has been mentoring and developing many resources for SSA Business Solutions in addition to ensuring SSA service standards are world-class. And as a part of SSA's leadership team, he has been driving various Asia Pacific consulting business operations. So we would like to again welcome Vijay Donde. So once again, on behalf of IPMA, we would like to welcome all our attendees from India and also from other countries. And we would also like to, on behalf of IPMA, welcome our four very key eminent panelists. And now would request Ganesh to take it from here. Ganesh, over to you.
Thank you, Deepakji. Thank you for the warm welcome. I'm going to start my slide share. Okay. I hope the screen is visible now.
Yes, Ganesh.
Thank you. All right. Very warm welcome to all the August audience. I know the afternoon sessions are always the tough ones for any session panelists to handle. We'll try to make it very interesting and very thought-provoking, if not the least, because this is one of the most latest advancements which is happening in terms of inventory management. Before I get into the subject matter details, a quick brief about SSA. SSA was founded by NC Narayan, which Deepakji introduced, and we have a global footprint across 20 countries and headquartered in Mumbai. NC is an author. He writes books on a variety of topics. His latest publication is on pragmatic leadership, which has become a subject in itself for organizations to drive how to develop leaders within organizations. Other two books are Lean Six Sigma in a Nutshell, Enigma of Lean, aligned to leaders again, where he demystifies all the challenges in applying these methodologies in organizations and pitfalls of wide fails and other things, and get into the methodology of how to apply it. Online, he is a very prolific writer. He writes on Facebook. His videos can be seen on YouTube. He has a Blogspot and LinkedIn account where he keeps posting these things, not just on technical topics, but on a wide variety of topics such as spirituality, such as parenting, such as music. So, very different areas where you can look at it, and he helps drive growth of individuals is the focus. About SSA, we are 21 years, serviced 24 countries, helped 1,000 plus business models, and achieved over 400 plus US $1 million saving. As you can see that our headquarters is in Mumbai, and then we have local presence in Oman, Dubai, and now this year expanding into Qatar, Saudi, and Sri Lanka and Thailand in the Southeast Asia regions. Focus of SSA in driving profit leadership in industry. Primarily what we help industries is with driving conversion cost from your RM to FG. How do you look at the cost it takes to convert raw material to finished good and reduce that? Direct material cost in terms of the design, the material contribution to the product end product, that is one area within the design area. The cost of inventory, be it raw material, be it work in process, be it the finished good inventory, how you can manage your carrying cost. The indirect labor cost, which talks about the support functions, planning, your procurement, sourcing, finance, marketing, sales, all of these add up to your indirect labor cost. How do you manage that? Cost of poor quality, most important, how do you handle rejects, rework, which is happening in the internal and external to the organizations? How do you eliminate and improve the quality of your processes? And last but not the least, the distribution and logistics cost. How do you stock inventory such that you don't lose sales and don't lose business opportunities? That becomes primary. At what optimum level should you keep it? How do you look at that and how do you manage that? A select list of global clientele for us, as you can see here, across the 4 regions where we service. And you can see the variety of clientele in which we service. It's not just plastics or not just pharmaceutical or not. It's across industry. We are completely domain agnostic. Our approach is to partner with you, understand your business problems, and cater to solutions to that. So in terms of the solutions, we have various work packages which we work along with you to develop. Few among them are the vendor integration package, which talks about how to get zero defect incoming supplies, because your end product finally is a function of how good your incoming supplies are. So how do you develop green channel vendors? How do you create valid partnerships which can help you to improve your service levels to your customers? Design optimization to make right first time designs and reduce the time for new product development. Both of this come under the design optimization. In working capital optimization, we talk about primarily the Ddmrp, demand-driven material requirements planning process of management. While this term Ddmrp is there, a lot of people think that it is a IT system, but no, it is a whole management system of how do you look at inventory, how do you plan, and how do you execute. Then there is lean manufacturing on the shop floor, where we look at throughput, how much you are producing per employee, and then how you can improve that particular factor. Distribution network, as I said, scientifically designed networks, and how much to stock, where to stock. These decisions are brought by analytics, which we do on a daily basis. And last but not the least, how to drive change and the continuous improvement in the organization. All this cannot happen without involvement of IT and HR. So we support in terms of ensuring that these areas are also taken care of from a implementation of these continuous improvement processes. So SSA is a partner, knowledge partner for Demand Driven Institute. We are an affiliate of Demand Driven Institute over here. And we are also a partner with B2Wise, which offers the IT solution to implement demand driven MRP and sales and SNOP processes. So in the IT service landscape, we do ERP evaluation selection, production planning, scheduling, how to plan your machines and operators, process management systems on the support processes, performance scorecard and management of how to drive performance in organizations, lead management, sales, PMO of offerings, inventory optimization using Ddmrp B2Y solution, industry 4.0 assessment for people who want to go up the value chain, how to go about into implementing industry 4.0, and the IT gap assessment. So these are areas which we assist in. So with that brief introduction, I will get into the subject matter for today, which is on Ddmrp. And setting the context is understanding how inventory has a role to play in terms of profit leadership. So if you look at where does inventory come into the profit definition. So when you look at profit, it's primarily sales minus cost, and your return on investment, when I'm looking at it over a period of time, is always your net profit over the capital investment and working capital. Now, the working capital is where right now the inventory has a role to play. What is happening over the years is that we have seen a steady deterioration in the ROI for industry. And few of the reasons is competition and the way the environment is changing. These things are influencing. And one of the other factors in manufacturing organizations is also the cost of working capital seems to be going up. So when we look at it, how it impacts the profits, and you look at the various elements of inventory, within the inventory itself, there are so many sub points which can be looked at. There are variable costs in terms of the actual cost of money it takes to buy inventory, the taxes, the insurance. The fixed cost would be your warehouse expenses, the staff employed over there. And then there are other costs, the inventory control cost, the obsolescence, pilferage. There could be other checks and balances which you are holding. And these are all contributing to the total inventory cost. And you can see that this contributes to around 25% of the total cost. And if you look at a benchmark, this is a typical standard. You can say that the range, it's a pretty wide range, plus minus 10. But if you really see, this is how the distribution happens. A large amount of this 50% of this cost is contributed from the carrying cost, which is the interest and the opportunity cost. The others being the inventory, storage, and material handling, the depreciation. And last but not the least is the inventory risk of obsolescence, which is the second largest component. So whenever you hold inventory, this is one major risk which a lot of organizations have to carry also. Now, a very thought-provoking question: is inventory a cause or is it an effect? Now, what do we mean by a cause or an effect? Is inventory a after fact or a before fact? So what happens is, because of the way the systems have changed, right? And it starts with, typical systems start with this area of marketing sales giving you a forecast. And, the world-class best systems are 70% forecast accuracy is there. This is the truth. And then on an average in India, we see that on an average, it's about 40 to 50% forecasting accuracy. Now you have errors in forecast. You have unpredictable supplies which does not come when you want. There are delays which happen. There are errors in data. Your bill of material may not be complete. So when you are putting in a forecast for a particular requirement, maybe it is not exploding into all the raw materials which are required, or maybe the recipes are not updated and the data is not correct. Maybe the inventory which is showing in the system is not what is actual. So you have all of these issues in the data itself. And then there is logistics variations which can happen. Over to that, when you're going to do a prediction of how long it's going to take to convert and deliver the order, you have a lot of manufacturing problems which happen on the shop floor. There may be defects which are happening. There may be reworks which is happening. You have to account for those as well. And then the demand itself, what forecast is there, and the demand itself has a huge variation, and it can swing up or down from the beginning of the month to the end of the month. So industries, these are all problems which are real life problems. So if I want to solve this real life problem, the only way I can handle these problems is by increasing my inventory and keeping a larger inventory, because I know that if I go up or down, I am at least taken care of in ensuring that I'm never out of stock, right? So if I have excess raw material, I know that if there are any of the unpredictable supplies, I'm taken care of. If I hold excess FGI, I know that if there is unpredictable demand which comes in, I am taken care of. I know that my data is not accurate, so to cover up for that, I keep some excess inventory. So it seems like the inventory is more of an impact because of the way we are designed today to manage all of these aspects. So at a systemic level, at a strategic level, the problems that inventory solves is the root cause of the problem. So here we are saying that these areas which in a traditional system, and if you compare, when I say traditional, if you look at 20 years back to now, there's a lot of change which has happened in the way the demand has changed. So when you look at the paradigms for inventory and you look at all the elements, raw material in transit, and then you hold it, and then there is the ERP system which does the material requirements planning based on your forecast or based on the existing sale order which you have. And then you get into the actual production of your finished goods, you hold the finished good inventories, and then you have the point of sales. So this is where your whole value chain of inventory management of RM, WIP, and FG and distribution levels that you hold the inventory. So the whole paradigm of how we manage these things is what we are going to see in detail. What are the traditional method and what is the Ddmrp method? So earlier what used to happen is that you are looking at reacting to market changes in moderation. You are continuously optimizing, reordering production, and then always giving changes which are there. You're trying to break down inventory to lower levels, tracking safety stock, and which is distress inventory and which has to be sold off. Those are things which you are doing. And then all of these add to the sales and operations planning. And then based on inputs from all of this, we determine the most productive inventory, which is it. So this approach which we have typical is a reactive approach. In the Ddmrp approach, what happens is it is completely demand driven, as the name suggests, is only as per the actual demand which is actually happening does the whole planning and the production actually happen. So it is a very proactive approach to managing inventory, and it has a better control. Now, one of the things which has also changed is the complexity of our operations. So if you look from the 19th century onwards, where craftsman-based gypsy production systems were there, going on to the mass production systems in the early 20th century, starting with the Ford Motor Company, and then to now when it is Industry 4.0 area, the complexity of the products have gone up. The complexity in terms of the variety has gone up. The demand patterns have changed completely. Your volumes which are required are changed completely. So because of these variety of changes, we will have to continuously look at how our systems to manage this also change in that. So what has happened on the system side? The earliest known thing was on the, in the Industry 4.0 journey, if we look at it, Industry 1.0 was the first in terms of mechanization, water, power, steam. So what was the transformation there is, you were able to move away from using human resource to using machines. That was the first major breakthrough. In the second breakthrough, you were moved away from your gypsy production to mass production and assembly lines. In the third transformation, we got in computers, ERP, automation, all this happened as part of the third. Probably a large number of organizations today are in and around this third revolution, where you are trying to put in systems, you're trying to do certain automation and other things. And what Industry 4.0, where the leaders have adopted this particular system already, is the cyber physical systems, wherein we are trying to streamline the interface of humans and machines and try to make sure that the machines are getting smarter at reading what is the need and how to modify it. So some of the factors which influence the inventory. Let's look quickly at uh, what changes that inventory can make. So if you really see what has happened over the years is that the zero defect quality is, from a customer's point of view, the customer expectations are very simple. He wants zero quality, he wants highest reliability, he wants higher efficiency and a courteous relationship service which is required. So the customer expectations, if you put yourself in the customer's shoes, would want the very same things that he is expecting. So this is very straight and simple. From a product life cycle point of view, what has happened over the years is that our product life cycles have significantly shortened. Earlier, a product life cycle, if you take on an average household goods, had a lifespan of over 15 years. And in 15 years time, today it has come down to like within 3 to 4 years, you have to replace it. Certain goods like phones and all, every 6 months to a year, you need a new product, right? So the demands on the product life cycle has significantly grown, which means that your ability to introduce new products has to change, has to increase. And from an inventory point of view, it means that you have to become very, very agile. You cannot, have large volumes which are going to be sustained for a long period of time, because by the time you ramp up, it's time for you to ramp down and then get into the next new product. The other major change is earlier you had one product which used to cater 80% of the volumes which are there. So that typically had less complexity. Today, the complexity is you have so many varieties which are being made, but the volumes in each product have shrunk. So you are going, you need to transition from a high volume and single variety to a low volume and high variety kind of a production system, which means the agility and application of lean, application of these systems are going to become very, very crucial for us to grow and sustain. And as an example, you can see as what is happening, like we have moved from B2B, B2C is completely online nowadays. COVID has only helped the situation. Amazon sells around 35 crore products on their platform. And you can see the kind of sales. You cannot predict what will work, what will not work, how much should be there. But our supply chain should be nimble enough to pick up any particular uptakes, any particular thing, and not able to have lost sales. That becomes the necessity today. So if you look at the role of the working capital in trying to handle these challenges which we saw, let's understand how the working capital impacts. So in the working capital cycle, what do we mean by working capital? Is that you buy raw materials on credit from your suppliers, and using that raw material is how you convert it into finished good, which you sell to your customers, and this becomes account receivable, this is accounts payable. And these two are largely determined by the market, the industry you're working in, and you don't have much say in terms of what these cycles would be. You would have a 40-day credit with your suppliers. COVID has changed this, made it about 100 days. Some places gone up to 160, 180 days credit. You don't get payments to suppliers when you're on the supplier side. Customers are doing the same thing on their end. They are trying to delay the payments back to you, so the receivables are going up. So, both these cycles are market determined. We have very less say in what happens here. So what happens is, to contribute the cash in hand which I need for my conversion cost, and what the other factor which is in our control is the inventory which we hold and which is required to convert it. So how much inventory should I hold and convert becomes one of the major contributor to this cash in hand and working capital which remains once we remove all of this. So let's understand a little bit on the cash cycle as we delve deep into this subject. So as you can see here, a typical standard Indian context, if I'm taking a raw material payment term of 30 days and a finished good value adding It takes about 20 days for you to manufacture and ship it out. And then the payment which is due to the supplier is due on the 30th day. And the payment which is going to be received from my customers after I ship it out, they have a 60-day credit terms, let's say. So what happens is I have to pay the supplier on day 30 while I receive the payment from my customer on day 80, which means that I need a working capital or a cash to cash cycle of 50 days is what it ends in. Now, if you look at this whole cycle, if I want to reduce this 50 days, as I said, the one thing which is in my control is focus on this value adding 20 days. And if I'm able to reduce it, that has got one particular aspect. So on the other end of it, if you look at something like an food industry, where you get raw materials on credit, and then right after getting it, you are able to value add. The minute you receive the raw material, you're able to convert it into finished good, collect the cash as your customers are going out. This works on a negative cash to cash cycle, which is primarily means that you're always cash positive because your payments happen after 30 days. One of the KPIs which we look at from an inventory management, which is very crucial for people to understand very in industry, is talking about this inventory turnover. So what does inventory turnover really mean is how long does it take for your inventory to convert into your finished goods. So in a year, how many turns does your raw material convert into finished goods is what this is an indication in money terms. So how do we do that? We look at your starting inventory or starting of the month inventory. We look at your ending inventory at the end of the month, and you get your average inventory per month. Now you also know what is the cost of your goods sold. So cost of goods sold is primarily your raw material cost plus your conversion cost added to it, which gives the cost of goods sold. And you also know your average inventory. So when I'm going to take the ratio of these two things, the cost of goods sold divided by the average inventory, I get what is called the stock turnover ratio or the inventory turnover. And this primarily means that I convert my raw material 5 times into finished good at the duration which I have considered over here. So if this is a 1 month cycle, then this is 5 times in a month I am converting this. This is a very high ratio. Probably this could be a yearly ratio, makes, it could be a poor kind of a scenario. So depending on what this inventory period is, your inventory turnovers can be different. A typical good industry practice is around 10 to 12, a typical benchmark which you want to achieve to is around 10 to 12. Best in class is around 20, 30. So, that is the kind of numbers which we are looking at as KPIs for turnover ratios. So with this background setting on how do we measure, what we measure, and what the context has changed, I want to call upon Naveen, our director from Middle East, to talk about the myths and what challenges the industry faces in terms of dealing with inventory. Over to you, Naveen. I'm going to stop here.
Yeah, Ganesh, one small thing. Yeah. Yeah, hi, Naveen. I just wanted to just introduce Mr. Jaish Rambia, who he basically walked into the panels at the end of my introduction, so I was not able to introduce him initially. So Mr. Jaish Rambia is a very senior managing committee member of IPMA, and he is the past president of the All India Plastics Manufacturers Association. He is chairman Plastic Parks. He is also the co-chairman of Environment Committee of IPMA. He is also the managing director and promoter of Premsense Plastics Private Limited. And this company is basically the manufacturer and exporter of the world's largest range of water bottles. He comes with a huge experience of industry. In fact, he is a repository of knowledge on the industry. APMA banks on Mr. Rambia for all the kinds of industry analysis, and he has been serving the industry with its effort day and night, and especially during the lockdown and the in last 1 year when the industry is facing such a problem. His knowledge and his wisdom has been very handy for the industry, and he also gives a lot of inputs to government on policy formulation. So, on behalf of ICMA, we would like to welcome our dear senior member, Mr. Jaish Rambia, as an industry panel for this particular session. So, welcome, Jaish Bhai.
Thank you, Deepak ji.
Welcome.
So, please, Naveen ji, please continue.
Thank you. Jayesh bhai, nice to see you after a long time. I hope you're doing great.
Good to see you, Naveen.
Okay, great. So thanks, Ganesh, for setting the tone. I will pick the thread from where he left. So I think by now the August audience would have agreed that inventory is no longer to be accounted as an asset. It is more of a liability, right? So that's the whole message we are driving. Although the accountants will slightly disagree every time we run this module with a group of, let's say, chartered accountants, they invariably say inventory is an asset, but because that's what the books of accounting teach us. But the modern thinking now, especially in the demand-driven world, where we are faced with so much uncertainty, and inventory ends up being something we hoard rather than keep in the right quantity to meet customer demand. Anything more than what is optimally needed is really a liability. So let's see what are some of the paradigm changes that are happening in the demand-driven world, or the VUCA world, as they call it, right? So one of the paradigm or the myth is that push and promote only works for sales. To achieve the sales target, we need to dump the material and somehow make the sale happen, because we want to show better numbers to our shareholders, and we want to have the notional feeling that year on year we are growing in double digits and so on. But invariably, it only adds to more waste in the whole supply chain, and more of an accounting game rather than a true sales growth happening unless we streamline the supply chain system. Customers will tolerate long lead times. This is another myth. Customers are getting more and more impatient these days, right? So customers want faster service, but they don't want to wait. The classic example is the automobile, booking a vehicle. Back in the 80s and 90s, we didn't mind waiting for several months, sometimes several years, for buying a new scooter or a new Maruti car. But today, we don't even want to wait for a day. We walk into a dealer. If he does not have the color of our choice, model of our choice, we'll go to the next dealership and buy it, whoever has the product ready-made available, even at the cost of paying a certain premium. So customers have become impatient now. And can forecasting really help us to better deal with customer demand? This is a long-standing myth, right? Forecasting is trying to look at the past and predict the future, which is quite unlikely. I think for all of us, when we did our budgets for 2020, financial year 21, I'm sure we must have forecasted, in the first quarter or the last quarter of last fiscal, we would have said, okay, we sold so much, let us plan for 10% growth or whatever it is. But then COVID happened, and I'm sure that all the forecasts went out of the window, right? Of course, COVID was a very extreme case, but even in notwithstanding COVID, we are living in a very uncertain times, and that's speaking of the geopolitical forces, the trade forces. There is constant uncertainty. So forecasting can only play a small role. Not that it is completely to be scrapped, but it has to be only one factor in our business decision, and not the primary factor by which we can commit inventory, commit capital for our business. So we can't really perfect forecast accuracy. This has been the whole argument. Ganesh will later talk about the demand-driven philosophy and how we fundamentally challenge the myths of forecasting or relying on forecasting in order to plan our business. One missing link, which traditional material planning or traditional demand planning misses, is the historic demand pattern of our business. This is usually overseen, overlooked, Even if you look at any traditional ERP system, even the modern day ERP system, there is hardly any provision provided in the ERP system to enter anything other than the sales order demand, which is orders we have received. And we usually inflate that with forecast demand because we cannot look beyond, let's say, 1 month or 3 month time horizon. There is no provision in the ERP systems to look behind in terms of what transpired, what is the demand pattern of various items, be it finished good or raw material, and what logic needs to be applied in future demand planning. So that is the missing link which we are trying to plug. So we end up with inventory variation. High inventory is one problem. Also low inventory, what we call as a bimodal distribution, where if let's say this is the target level of inventory for a given item, we are usually too little or too much of the item. And both are problematic. If you have too little of it, there is demand for the item, but you're not able to fulfill. Or if you have too much of it, you're fulfilling demand, but then you're left with too much inventory of the item, right? And this is a constant frustration for most managers and business owners, right? In my previous talk also I was mentioning about, there is a beautiful research done by this gentleman called as Richard Schonberger. Let me see if I can write down his name. It's a complicated last name. Richard Schonberger, yeah. You can Google up this research work he has done. He has studied the last 20-30 years of inventory performance of various industries across automotive, semiconductor, electronics, so many industries he has studied. And it's a little sobering insight. In a nutshell, what his research reveals is that the inventory turnover across industries has been diminishing. So what do you mean by inventory turnover? Like Ganesh presented in that slide, your inventory as a ratio of cost of goods sold. So which means higher the inventory turnover ratio, the more value you're going to generate with the inventory that you hold. So Richard Schonberger found out that the inventory turnover performance across industries has been pathetic. Now, there are many hypotheses as to why this has been the case, and you cannot pin it down to one factor, right? There are multiple factors. One of the factors is that in the last 30-40 years has been the time frame where the industries have globalized largely, right? The general trend has been to chase after sourcing opportunities where the cost is lowest. There is another interesting research done that says that the marginal cost increase of global sourcing is very small. So in a nutshell, you are able to get cheaper sources from overseas, bring it to our shores, and then process it and sell it to customers at a lower cost than what we are able to get local sourcing. So generally the tendency has been to, okay, let's go overseas, let's go to China, let's go to Vietnam and other low cost sources, bring the raw material or bring the semi-finished and then sell it locally. But in the bargain, our lead times are inflating and therefore the inventory cover also goes up. And if there is any uncertainty or unforeseen developments, we end up with too much inventory or too little inventory. And this has become a burning issue, not just for India, but across the world. So in a plastics processing scenario, you have, of course, inventory in the raw material form, which is our PET and resin and various other raw material that we source, the scrap that we are generating, and so on and so forth. We are all familiar with this. The inventory per se, you could either have a situation of finished good inventory if you're in a retail industry or a retail setup, B2C setup, where we are constantly chasing. There is competition trying to take away market share. So there is a challenge to make sure that we are first to service the market. No demand should go unfulfilled. But at the same time, we have to tightly control the inventory without having to have non-moving stocks or too much or too little of items that are required. On the raw material side, we want to make sure we are securing the raw material at favorable rates. But at the same time, we don't want to have too much of raw material, which is going to be a problem under business risk. So this is a constant battle that we are fighting. Usually, if you go and talk to the supply chain managers or the business owners or managers in the industry, you will find that they are struggling for a very scientific approach. Just yesterday, I was mentioning about another scenario with one of the facilities management industry in Oman, where we are consulting. The the CFO of that company was fortunately there when we were working with a core team on some cost efficiencies. And he came with a very burning issue. He said, Naveen, I'm very much suffering with one issue. I asked him, what is the issue that you're faced with? He said, in one of our units, in one of their automotive dealership units, I was saying there is so much dead inventory, non-moving inventory. And every time at the end of the year, when we are doing the, closing the books, we have to find some ways to either get rid of it or write it off and so on. And I'm not able to figure out how to fix this issue, because every year the business head comes and says, okay, I will solve the problem this year. But then the year goes by and there is no concrete action taken. And there are many excuses why he's not able to solve the problem. He will say, boss, demand didn't pan out, or variety change, market forces change, and so on and so forth. So when we discussed, I showed him a few slides on the demand-driven MRP, which Ganesh is going to share. He was floored. He said, boss, this is the answer we need. And he said, immediately, I'm sending my managers to get trained, and we are going to take this path because this is a very simple and prescriptive approach, and I can see the visibility to at least 30-40% improvement inventory turnover performance. So every industry is suffering. We are not the only industry with this challenge. There are a lot of benchmarks available. Ganesh already covered this aspect, but you are welcome to look at, usually people suffer every time in consulting. If I were to list down the top 3 FAQs we get, they say benchmark, benchmark, benchmark. Any industry we go, boss, you don't know our industry, can you bring some benchmark, and so on. My retort to them is that if I'm sure there is at least one company in your industry that is listed, go look at their balance sheet and income statement, which is publicly available, and see how they are doing. And at least one industry which is a leader in your domain will be listed anywhere in the world, and look at their financials. Benchmarking is not a big deal. In the automotive world, when we were doing this benchmarking with one of the private, non-listed automotive OEMs last year, they said, boss, we want to know what is a benchmark in inventory turnover in our industry. And believe it or not, this is one of the top 3 OEMs in India in two-wheelers. They did not know what the benchmark is for inventory turnover in their industry. But at least the CEO was decent enough to acknowledge this. He said, I will, let me take the weekend and let me analyze your reports, and let me also see what my competition is doing. He came back that weekend, the following Monday, and said, boss, I surrender. We have no clue how we are managing our inventory, and I really need help, because Bajaj is doing inventory turnover of 3, Hero Motor is doing inventory turnover of 3.2 and whatnot, and I am doing inventory turnover of only 2.1. So that means clearly the same vendors are supplying to me who are supplying to Bajaj. I have the same terms of trade with them, give or take. But there is something fundamentally wrong, because they are able to run the same, let's say, same scale of business with at least 20-30 crores less inventory than me. That means there is something fundamentally wrong in the way I am managing. That acknowledgement is crucial. Because if the leadership team believes that everything is fine in my world and I don't need to change, and everything, problem is out there in the world, customers are unreasonable or suppliers are unreasonable, then you are welcome to live in that fool's paradise. But that outliers, small fraction of leaders who come and acknowledge that not everything is fine. We may be very bright and good, and we know our industry deeply, but there are still gaps in the way we are managing our affairs. Then the conversation starts and the spark is ignited to go deeper into the issue. So to give a quick context of the whole planning system, this, believe it or not, this is about 70 years old. 1950 was in 1950s, this gentleman, Joe Orlicki, conceptualized the concept of material requirement planning, what we call as MRP in modern day parlance. But in 1950s, there was no computer program available to materialize his vision of MRP. The idea was simple. He said, if I'm running an industry, I should know what my customer wants, when they want it, and then what are the raw material needed to fulfill that need, and when I should order, how much quantity I should order, when I should produce, and when I should dispatch it. It's a simple calculator, and you multiply that across multiple products and so on. But in the 1970s, IBM came forward and they wrote the computer program for material requirement planning based on Joe Orlicki's vision. And that was the first edition of MRP. which later on, of course, went through multiple generations. And today we have the ERP. You may be running SAP or Oracle or Microsoft Dynamics or one of those products. At the heart of it, they all follow the same engine or logic, where translating customer demand into material requirement and then scheduling when the parts should be delivered, when they should be manufactured, and when they should be dispatched. Now, what has been traditionally lacking or challenging in MRP is that despite 70 years in evolution, one glaring flaw in the MRP logic was that you're always using only one source of information for your MRP planning engine, right? So suppose you're running SAP or Dynamics or whatever that system is. One source of information that you use is your demand, right? You will all agree that, okay, demand kya hai? You have your sales order, which is confirmed order that the sales team has booked, and then you have the forecasted demand. So these are the two sources of demand that you have in your system. But one major source of information that is missing in the whole equation is what was your past consumption of that item, right? So that means if you're planning, for example, if you're making bottles and you're selling those bottles, there has been a demand history of those bottles. Let's say it will not be a straight line. Let's say you sold 10,000 bottles in the month of January, then 8,000, then 12,000, then 3,000. So there is always a demand history of that item. Now, depending on the type of item, that demand may be extremely stable or it may be seasonal and so on. But no MRP system ever looks at this side of the information. So broadly, you are depending on the future demand, which is partially true because sales order is the truth. Unless customers cancel the order, largely a confirmed sales order will materialize. But you cannot run your factory purely based on sales order, because sales order will have a limited time frame of outlook, right? Suppose you may have a 3-month visibility of sales order, but as you go farther out in the future, you are only predicting that orders will come, but these may not be materialized or realized demand. So sales order has maybe a 50% possibility of being useful, and then you rely on forecast. Now, forecast usually who will give the full version of the truth. If you ask the sales team, they will say, "Boss, we are going to sell 50% more than we sold last year." And if you ask, perhaps the planning team, they will say, well, it's not the case because we don't see any variation in order input than last year. So you will always, its forecast is very debatable and contentious, right? So invariably you will be relying on a 50%, 30 to 50% accurate signals to plan your action. So what you end up doing is, therefore, you don't want to lose out on orders. Therefore, we are on the side of caution. So we will end up with ordering of inventory, perhaps more than what the sales order has to say. Now, this has been the traditional struggle in MRP systems, one by the logic of MRP, which is not flawed. It's a perfect science, right? Kitna chahiye, we will bring that much and we will produce that much. The flaw comes in the construct of how the system is executed, because it is missing out on the variability in demand, and therefore there is no way for you to compensate other than inflating your forecast and therefore increasing how much we will order for material and resources required. So Ddmrp challenged this. So therefore they said MRP is good. We don't want to say MRP is flawed, but unless MRP is demand driven, you will never have a reliable system. Therefore you need to have a planning engine that factors both sources of information. It has to factor demand, and it has to, of course, factor future demand, which is sales. You have to factor, sorry, let me rephrase. You have to factor past demand, which is generally ignored by the MRP engine, but also future demand and sales order demand. Unless you have a balanced view of demand to the system, your system will constantly be oscillating between understocked and overstocked. And we want to avoid this bimodal distribution. We would rather have a stock situation which is somewhere here, which is optimal, which is very close to the actual demand that plays out. So there has been a lot of evolution in the Ddmrp thinking, but it has become mainstream in the last 4 to 5 year time frame. The book came out some years ago, and there has been a lot of debate, a lot of conferences on demand driven. The book also goes by the same name. It is called as Demand Driven MRP by Carol Pitak and Chad Smith. You can look that one up. And so in a sense, you want to prevent the lost sales. So DDMRP aims to minimize lost sales situation, because it's not saying to minimize your inventory, but just to hit the sweet spot in terms of what is the optimal inventory required to meet the order requirement. At the same time, keeping the working capital in a tight check, that you're not taking a blind call in terms of inflating your inventory position. And at the same time, you want to balance your inventory position between what the historic demand situation was and what the future demand outlook for the items is. So in the previous session, I had spoken about the levers for profit leadership, and the key lever that demand-driven demand-driven supply chain planning system handles is optimizing the working capital, which is the key lever, often ignored or at least underserved in the scheme of management, right? So it again boils down to methodology. There are, of course, software and solutions available to make this enhance the MRP system in a way that you can take your traditional planning engine and make it demand driven. There are softwares that sit in tandem with the existing ERP implementation, be it SAP or Microsoft, or it doesn't matter. There are APIs that link to your traditional ERP and gives a planning window to the planners, that on a daily basis they can monitor the inventory position at an item level basis the most recent demand on the item and the most recent inventory position of the item, so that instead of having a longer MRP run cycles, which usually in industries ranges between 1 week to fortnightly or sometimes on a monthly basis, by the time you take the inventory decisions, already a lot of time has elapsed. You're already critically understocked or overstocked on items. This reduces the planning window from a longer cycle to almost a daily cycle. So on that note, I will pass on to Ganesh to deep dive into the DDMRP science.
Okay, thanks, Naveen. Let me just share, take over. Great. So let's deep dive into DDMRP now that we have seen what traditional inventory management systems, where the problems occur. We will try and deep dive into the DDMRP system. So in this approach, what happens is DDMRP helps to plan right size inventory and achieve highest delivery performance. These two become the main focus areas of the DDMRP system. It is a planning and execution approach for combining forecast and demand pull. So it includes what MRP does. MRP is still required very much, but it builds on the capability of MRP to make it further and better. And it covers the business right from forecasting to order to delivery to inventory management. So within the DDMRP ecosystem itself, there is DDMRP at the core, which is the tactical daily planning execution part of it. And then there is an SNOP and other planning methods within DDMRP, which takes a longer view of 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, and then how to do the planning at that level. And then there is a strategic element to it. So how do you go about doing it? So DDMRP as a science has also evolved from going tactical to strategic and getting a full-fledged view of it. So what I'm going to cover in the context of my point here is only the tactical planning execution part of it at this within this presentation. Naveen talked about this in the last session, where the return on asset for US economies, when you look at it from 1965 to 2012, and this was a research by Deloitte University, you have seen that consistently the return on asset is continuously falling. The primary thing is development and proliferation of planning systems. And by planning systems, we are talking about moving from MRP to MRP2, ERP, advanced planning systems. All these have happened over the years. This has not enabled a better return on asset performance, despite labor productivity doubling. So a lot of automation has happened, productivity has gone up. So all this has happened. And while all this has happened, still my return on asset is continuously decreasing, which fundamentally means that something is wrong in the way we are doing things. So in the MRP system, when we look at it, what are the primary fundamental assumptions which no longer work in the VUCA world which we are in? One is all forecast sales demand is accurate. Second is sufficient time to accomplish the schedule, that there is enough time to do what we want to do. And all components will be ready on time and in quantity, which means that everything will go as per plan, right? And when these assumptions become invalid, that's when the effectiveness of the system which we are in gets hit. And then we resort to managing outside the system in Excel sheets. And you will be amazed by the number of organizations who work on a parallel Excel system to counter the problems which are there, which are not perfect in the real world ERP system. So to aid all of these issues, there have been certain interventions. Lean had a focus of reducing waste. Six Sigma had an initiative to reduce variability into your product quality. Theory of constraints helped to focus on improving throughput. Now, while these three methodologies, and Naveen talked about it, that the focus is more on the methodology. So these three are the methodologies which aid in better planning, helping into doing things faster, doing things right, doing a better management of how we manage resources, both equipment and people. Now, when we look at all these three methods, what is fundamentally common in all of these three is flow. And what do we mean by flow is the flow of information and material is the core of these three systems, is in any of which we have to focus and try and see how the flow can be enhanced in the system. Now let's just understand what flow is. So flow is the velocity of information and material. So we all know that right from the raw material to the finished good, which happens, there is a sense of information flow on the sale order, which then gets converted to purchase orders, which goes out to suppliers, and then the raw material comes in. So there is a heavy dependency on the information flow to happen at the right time and the right places, based on which this raw material will come in and then gets converted into finished goods. So Clausel's law, which is talking about, is your ROI is directly proportional to the flow of this information. The faster and more accurate this velocity and information and material is, the better is your flow, the better is your ROI. Naveen talked about this bimodal distribution of the inventory which is there. And just to set context a little more into that, is that inventory, when we are looking at inventory as a problem, what we want to do is right size inventory, which is what Ddmrp focuses on. So we mean that there is a range in which we want to keep the inventory at which it has to be there. If it is too less, we are stocked out. If it is too much, we are putting cash on the table and spending too much on this. So there is an optimal range and there is a warning range before which we have to get to it. More often than not, what happens in a traditional ERP system is that there is constant oscillation between these two zones, which means that right before, and what we have seen in the industry is typically, mostly it is a monthly run which happens. Some places we have seen a weekly run of the MRP, that whenever the run happens, you go from too much to too little. Okay. And what this means is that the oscillation happens and the inventory quickly moves from one distribution to other. And this issue is there. What does this issue mean is that the inventory, and this on the y-axis is the number of parts or the components. The components which you really need in the optimal range are generally not available. And what you don't want are generally there, and or they are not there at all. So this is where the dichotomy of the traditional inventory management system is. Naveen talked about this book. There are two books which have been introduced. One is the Precisely Wrong is the first book, which was authored by them, Carol Pitak and Chad Smith of the Demand Driven Institute, the founders of that. And then the Demand Planning Material Requirements Planning book. So both these books talks about how a new management system has to build on the existing MRP to take it ahead. So just a quick one on the lean part, the methodology part. Lean talks about creating a pull system, which means you need to respond as per the customer's buying pattern. And that is the philosophy of lean. Producing stock in response to actual demand, that is, you make to an order, that becomes the philosophy of a ideal pull system, which means that as the stocks are getting fulfilled at the customer end, then the distributor will replenish the stock, the manufacturer will fill only what has been consumed, and the supplier will give what has been consumed by the manufacturer. This is an ideal state lean system. Now, when we look at it, we are looking at across the value stream. When we look at it, you have the information flow, we have the material flow, and the lead time to the customer is the time from the order to the receipt of the payment. So when we are looking at the whole business system, we are looking at the methodology which focuses and the technology, which is our ERP system or any other management system which have been implemented. Both of this have to be work is the ideal way in which we are going to look at it. So for my flow to improve, this lead time has to come down. This time which is required to fulfill the customer order has to come down. Then there is going to be appreciation and value for money. So along with the lead time coming down, the product which is delivered has to be right first time as well. So that becomes a important aspect as part of the value stream flow. If you look at the theory of constraint, what theory of constraint says is, theory of constraint says that you need to focus on where your bottlenecks are in the system. And once you start optimizing those bottleneck systems, that's when you will be able to improve the throughput in the system and gain and reduce the inventory handling which you are keeping, because those bottlenecks are no longer there. So there is a concept of drum, buffer, and rope. DBR is what the theory of constraint talks about it. It says that you need to have a pace at which your manufacturing happens, which is determined by the drum or the pacemaker system. And traditionally, the pacemaker system is the bottleneck process or the slowest process in the system, which sets the pace of the system, because you cannot increase the throughput of your system more than the capacity of your bottleneck process. Having done that, they say that you need to start developing the Kanban systems, which are giving the indication as saying that how and at what frequency should each of the next process steps be working. And wherever you have challenge in terms of meeting the demand of that particular process step, then you would keep a buffer to ensure that it is never going or it is never dried out of stock, and you keep this right size buffer. Now, while TOC has been very beautifully managed and implemented across industry and yielded huge benefits, there are a few things which were still missing in terms of deciding how much should we keep as buffer, how much should we do it as these things. So what Ddmrp has done is taken these concepts of best practices of dynamic adjustment, keeping buffers from the best practices of Lean, Six Sigma, TOC, and built it into the whole demand-driven MRP management system, so that you get one system which gives you all the benefits of all the best practices together. What are the benefits of that? You get on-time delivery performance over 95%, average inventory reduction of around 25-30%, easy intuitive process which completely removes people dependencies. And by this, I mean that you're removing the Excel management if you're going in for a technology with a system. But even with Excel-based system, if you're going to implement, what it does is it removes the ability of the people to focus on what is going to be of more importance. You know, traditionally the planners are always following up in terms of when my material will be coming based on the due date, but probably that material is not required on the shop floor for 3 days hence, and some other material which is due 2 days later might be in short supply today, but that visibility does not come to the planner in the clear way. So the Ddmrp system tries to remove all these ambiguity across systems and gives a one view to everybody. Now, if you get into the primary concepts of Ddmrp, one of the things is the concept of nervousness. Now, what this means is the longer the procurement and manufacturing lead time, this is the lead time for procurement. This is the lead time for manufacturing. The longer this planning horizon, the less accurate the planned orders will be. And the less accurate the planned orders, there will be more course correction because I will have changes which will keep happening across this whole duration, right? So when these changes are continuously happening, but my customer tolerance for when he places an order to when he should receive it, his customer tolerance time might be a fraction of my planning time, right? So the sale order visibility is for a very small fraction of period of my entire planning. And this constant course correction, which we keep doing to manage this, sets in nervousness in the whole system. And this is the reality of many manufacturing systems which we have seen, many manufacturing organizations which we have seen. They're planning horizons because you're doing global sourcing, you're doing purchasing from across seas. Usually, if you're doing imports, your procurement lead times are upwards of 2-3 months. And then you have to plan for the manufacturing, but the customer expects that within 15 days, I need my deliveries. So that is the reality of the systems. Now in a traditional system, what happens is this whole system, what happens is there is an impact called a bullwhip effect. What does that mean is if a customer has forecast X quantity in terms of 10,000 quantity, by the time this customer forecast reaches the suppliers, this 10,000 would have become 15,000, primarily because we may have MOQs on our finished good. We may have certain MOQs on our supplier. There may be certain other requirements, which may be their batch processes, which we have introduced in the system. And all of this results in a higher supplier order, which eventually goes. And this then material pushes through the system and thereby creating an imbalance between the forecast and the orders. So the Ddmrp primarily is trying to reduce the variability in the system by holding inventories which are strategically located, which is the concept of decoupling. So when we say strategically located, there is a science by which we identify that at which locations, how much inventory should be kept, which will help in ensuring that we can reduce this bullwhip effect, which goes back to our suppliers. So it has a 5-step process, the first one being strategic inventory positioning. And then second is talking about how much should be kept. So you decide where do you want to keep inventories. Then basis that you decide how much inventory should be kept and what is your red, yellow, green zones. So it primarily goes into your red, yellow, green, which we have seen that you should not be into your overstock zone. Neither should you be into your red zone, which is your safety stock level. So you need to be somewhere in between. And then how do you adjust for, a Diwali season is coming or a high sales season is coming or a supplier is having a shutdown, a planned shutdown. So how do you go about doing adjustments for all of these changes which are happening on a day-to-day basis? And how do you change these buffer profiles and levels to account for these known things, right? There are a lot of things which are known, but the traditional MRP does not offer these flexibilities to keep these systems because those systems are so hardwired to do any adjustment takes a lot of effort. But the Ddmrp system, it becomes very nimble to do these adjustments. Based on this, you do the actual demand planning, what is our confirmed orders which are there and what is the forecasted elements which are there. We take a balance of both of it, forecast and actual orders, and then get into the actual execution, which is visible and collaborative to all the teams across all the within the whole organization, so that there is a common understanding of where we are in terms of what the actual demand is. So in essence, it kind of brings together all the best practices together and then delivers you the best practices. So with this, I'd like to stop here in terms of saying it. Call Vijay on, who is our CEO, to give a case study where we did and actually share some of the screenshots of how we piloted it in Excel and demonstrated the benefits of Ddmrp in an organization. So Vijay, over to you.
Thank you, Ganesh. Let me share my screen. Is my screen visible?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, first of all, thank you, Ganesh and Naveen, for setting up the tone. Many of us, when we have gone through this entire the thought process of DDMRP and the journey from MRP to DDMRP, does it really help? Does it really, gives a result and the number what we were talking about in terms of the on-time delivery, in terms of the ensuring that the customer requirements are being met, and at the same time the inventory turnover, that is what we were discussing as one of the indicator, is it really happening, is it really improving? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to actually showcase two case studies where this entire approach and this methodology has been applied absolutely in the same the systematic way, the 5-step approach what Ganesh has explained. See, one of the case study is coming from the product company. So primarily what they are doing, they are actually manufacturing the molded product. So these are extruded batons. Batons is nothing but these are the tube lights. Yeah. And then the plastic panels and then outdoor products. And they have various brand, be it a Panasonic, be it the Wipro and so on. So this company is manufacturing and supplying to their specific brand. Now, one of the important aspect, as Naveen and Ganesh has explained, yeah, traditionally we keep on going with the sales order and the forecast, and that is something which is really creating a lot of issues in terms of the inventory which is getting piled up. Yeah, and based on this forecast, okay, based on this forecast alone, my procurements, they will start placing the orders for the raw material buying. You'll start seeing the way PPC, my entire PPC team, they keeps on scheduling each and every manufacturing operations. So in other words, the PPC team has to actually run from the pillar to post, and especially when there is a change in the demand happens from the customer. Again, there is a lot of back and forth things has to go during the manufacturing as well as the procurement as well. You need a lot of coordinations. So that's primarily where the PPC keeps doing it. So primarily, they lose the focus on what PPC is supposed to do. Instead of they constantly becoming more of the people in the follow-up sections with the procurement as well as the manufacturing, and there is no linkage between the actual customer demand. Naveen did mention about two things when we talk about the demand. One is the future demand, yeah, and other is the past demand. Now, what these guys were doing it, these guys were focusing only on the forecast, that's a future demand. But they have never ever given the thought process in terms of what was the actual consumption which was happened, and what was the actual demand pattern which was being received by the customer. And that is where the DDMRP is going to really help us in considering those past as well as the future and creating that balance. So what we have done, we have applied the roadmap of the 5-step approach, where we talk about the strategic decoupling. That means where to put the inventory. Yeah, it is not that you are going to put the inventory whether it is a WIP or finished good the way you are thinking. No, there has to be some scientific approach to really the identified estimate, and then what is that buffer level and the dynamic adjustment what Ganesh was explaining. And then obviously, how do we get into the demand-driven planning? When I'm saying the demand-driven planning, that is at the procurement level as well as the manufacturing level as well. And how do you create this entire the visible collaboration as a part of the execution? So let me start the entire thought process. As far as the SKUs are concerned, what we have done, we have actually gone into the entire demand pattern. Okay. Historically, we have collected the data, and surprisingly, you'll find that 5% of their SKUs, okay, were having about 54% demand. And it happens. It's like that 80-20 principle rule. It is very important for us to really understand which are those SKUs which are having the different demand patterns. Now, based on this demand pattern, then we come up with the strategy whether I have to go for the MTS or MTO. Make to order and make to stock strategy, because every SKU, depending on this demand pattern, will have a different behavior. And that is how my response should be according to the way it is being consumed, according to the way it is being demanded by the customer and the way it has been consumed and utilized. So what we do, we create this entire the MTS and MTO as a part of the strategy among the available SKUs. Now, what we do, as Ganesh was explaining, the strategic inventory positioning. For example, now these guys were actually manufacturing the buttons, yeah, or the tube lights or the panels. Now, what happened if you look at this is the entire value stream in which I get the raw material from my supplier, and then I have got a raw material inventory which is in place. Then this raw material inventory is being fed to the different sub-assembly operations. Yeah, these are my sub-assembly operations, and then finally there is an assembly, packing, and then finally the dispatch happens. Now the question comes, whenever I'm doing this sub-assembly, what should be the inventory level here? When I'm going to talk about the raw material inventory, what should be the inventory level here? Now, unless and until I don't have this informed inventory, okay, I'll keep on keeping this randomly, and that is what typically you will see on the shop floor. Yeah, my WIP, if you go and ask somebody why this much of inventory lies in the WIP, some of them may be knowing some answer, but for all practical purpose, they may not be knowing how much I'm supposed to keep it. Now, when we say the strategic inventory, there has to be a scientific way to estimate what should be these quantities. So that is what you are going to basically establish, yeah, at the raw material level, at the sub-assembly level, at the assembly level, at the finished good level. So this is the one of the important step what we actually keep following while working on the strategic inventory positioning. Once that is done, now these are basically various my SKUs, what we are experiencing. Yeah. Now, based on the current forecast, that is what we were discussing about. Yeah, the current forecast, which we are talking about, which my marketing is giving about the future, and maybe what are the immediate demands that can be of 1 month or a couple of weeks, and then I try and take how the past consumption was happening for the given SKUs. Now, with this entire information, what I'm going to do, I'm going to basically establish what is going to be the average daily demand for the given SKUs. Now, I'm not going to go by only the future demand. I'm just repeating this particular thought process. I will ensure that this is being established based on this entire past and the future. And then I will arrive to what is the stocking norms I must have. Yeah. Then I will talk about the cover stock and the cycle stocks, depending on the lead time of my raw material procurement or the manufacturing as well. So I keep those things at the back of my mind. Then I can actually create this entire plan for a month, even on the daily basis or the weekly basis or even the monthly basis. For the given those SKUs, okay, with the given stocking norms, how much quantity I must produce, okay, how much quantity, keeping that the quantity what I'm going to produce, how much quantity I'm supposed to buy or procure from the supplier as well. And I will keep adjusting this based on the way actual consumption happens, yeah, from the customer. So I will have that dynamic adjustment, which is going to help me to take a necessary course correction based on the actual consumption pattern which is available. So once I do this, yeah, then I get into the demand-driven planning, which is the production planning. Now, with this entire the SKU understanding the buffer quantities, understanding the dynamic adjustment. Now, what is happening? Now, PPC, that is where production planning control is going to give input to my manufacturing that how many quantity they are supposed to produce. Now, they are not pretty sure, okay, whatever the number they are going to talk about, okay, whether that is the right number. Now, what is happening, as Ganesh was mentioning, that is where there is a dependency on the person. Now, my system is going to tell me whether I need to produce the quantity. Yeah. If so, what is that quantity I'm supposed to produce? And this absolutely depending on how that buffer penetration happens. Now, the buffer penetration is nothing but the rate at which that SKU is getting consumed. Okay. In other words, the rate at which that SKU is being utilized by my end customers. And these are the different, as Ganesh was explaining, the red, green, and yellow. Scientifically, these numbers are being calculated. Okay, so here I don't really require to use the domain knowledge or the superhuman efforts. My system is going to tell me whether I have to produce or whether I have, and if produce, what quantities I'm supposed to. Now this is a manufacturing. Likewise, what I can do the similar thing for the procurement as well. So with this entire the visible and collaboration executions, my PPC scheduling for the various section, I don't really require to do that, because my system is a set in such a way, the way the pool is happening in terms of my customer, based from my assembly, from assembly to sub-assembly, and from sub-assembly to the raw material, and from raw material to supplier. Yeah. So each section scheduling is being done by themselves based on that buffer penetration report, which is so dynamic. This can be released even on the real-time basis. Okay. So this is the beauty of this entire visible and collaboration approach using the Ddmrp. Now another case which I will explain, which we have done into the appliance manufacturing. They were manufacturing the fan. The expectation from the management was they should be able to deliver the particular product within the 24 hours across the different distribution centers across the country, and this was done across the pan India. They wanted to create the pool manufacturing system. Yeah, they wanted to ensure that how the RM and FG inventory is being optimized, and obviously a working capital, which is ultimately is going to have the major impact on this. We have applied the same principle. Yeah. Now, before getting into this application, then we have collected what was the baseline performance. Now, if you really look at here, now the availability, okay, of the particular product at the customer end or at the point of sale was about only 52%. So that means a 48% on an average. Okay, when the customer comes and is asking for the particular product of yours, 48% of the time your product is not available at the point of sales. And this is where the IRD and as a management, they wanted to ensure that how this availability can be improved. So this was one of the important metric which we kept at the back of our mind. And then obviously for the finished good inventory, it was almost about 81 days inventory. For the raw material, it was about 21 days inventory. And as I said, this depot location across the pan India, which we have mapped, and as I mentioned, the expectation was that within the 24 hours, they should be able to deliver or make it available to the point of sales or at the given the depot. Second part, they had a manufacturing location in one of the region, that is in the northern region of the country. But even in spite of that, irrespective of the region, be it in the east, south, or west, still the availability should be within 24 hours. And this is where you can say that these are the different the depots which they have identified in the different locations. Now, what we have done, if you really look at, we have done the entire mapping of the entire supply chain, including the distribution channels. Now you can see that this is where the depots, yeah, and from the depots it comes to the regional distribution center, and from my regional distribution center, then it comes to my mother warehouse, and from my mother warehouse it comes to my factory, and then from the factory, of course, I got a raw material, and from raw material it goes to the supply. So can you see that this is where the entire mapping was required end to end. Now, when the target is you need to make this available 24 hours, that means that this entire chain is supposed to be dynamic enough to respond depending on how the consumption happens. And that is the consumption when I'm saying at the real-time consumptions. We have done this entire mapping with the strategic inventory positioning, identifying the buffer level, identifying what are the different operating stations where we are supposed to basically keep those inventories. If I have to just simulate this in terms of how the entire process works. Now I have got a depots which are across the pan India. Then we have got the regional distribution center. Then this is a mother warehouse, and then the factory, and then this is how supply goes. So how this entire channel works. The moment the consumption happens from the depot is going to basically send the buffer penetration report based on the consumption Based on this buffer penetration probe, which comes to the regional distribution center, they will replenish the stock based on the consumption. Then accordingly, a regional RDC will send the buffer penetration report to mother warehouse, and then a mother warehouse is going to subsequently replenish the stock with the RDC, and the journey goes on. Mother warehouses releases the buffer penetration report to the factory, and the factory start manufacturing, and they will start basically pulling out the raw material. And for the raw material, they will basically send or release that my buffer penetration report for the raw material or bought out items or any kind of the items which are buying from the supplier, and then it goes to my suppliers. So while doing this, if you really look at what we have done, we have established the end-to-end mechanism. One is the demand-driven supply. My name saying the demand-driven supply is from my mother warehouse to RDC, RDC to the depot. Now I need to understand whether I need to transfer or I am not supposed to transfer this from either my RDC to depot or from my mother warehouse to RDC. And if I'm supposed to transfer, how much quantity I'm supposed to transfer. So this becomes my buffer penetration report. Okay. And this information is available. Now here, this is where the distribution guy, he doesn't really require to break his head if you have got a multiple distribution center across the country. Yeah, and it is humanly impossible for someone to really manage if I have got maybe more than 100 depots. Now the system is going to tell me which depot needs how many quantities. And that is how I'm going to basically manage the entire supply part towards the depot. Second, what I'm going to do here, now I'm going to basically schedule my entire production planning. And this is again based on the actual demand which is there. Now here, as I was explaining earlier, I'm going to decide whether as a part of the production planning or the production scheduling, my PPC guy has to only go to the system. He has to understand whether I'm supposed to produce or whether I'm not supposed to produce. If so, how many? Depending on the buffer penetration, and this buffer penetration which happens based on the real-time consumption. And the last but not least, this is my procurement process. Again, the entire procurement process based on my demand driven. Same principle applies. Which SKU I'm supposed to buy and in what quantities. So this is how the entire demand driven principle, what has been discussed so far, is going to help us in establishing this system. As a result, if you remember, our availability was 52%. So from 52%, we could improve this closer to 90%. And when the definition of the availability remains same, to ensure that the product is available within 24 hours at the depots or at the point of sales. And this is how my system is going to help you. Now, many times there is a myth. If I have to improve the availability, I will have to increase the inventory. And this is where the theory of whatever we are discussing as of now, it is proving absolutely wrong that for me to meet the customer demand need not necessary to have a high inventory. Rather, from 52 to 98%, we could bring down the RM inventory from 21 days, to almost 13.5 days. And likewise, we could actually bring down even the WIP inventory and finished good inventory. Now, if you really look at this entire estimation, what is the business benefit? Now, with this entire cycle of inventory, almost you can see the inventory which has been reduced, at my WIP finished good and the RM level is almost 36.5 crores. That means that working capital is available for me. And if you really look at the net saving, what is there with me in terms of the inventory carrying cost, that's the interest cost, which was almost about 2 CR. And this is where the beauty of the demand driven. So what happened if you really look at my metric, I'm supposed to meet the customer demand. I'm supposed to increase availability. At the same time, I want to bring down my working capital. This is something which when you are going to see from the business parlance. And of course, these are the SSA credential which Ganesh was explaining in the beginning. the partners in terms of the demand-driven applications, DDI and DB2Is. So obviously, what is important here for this various training programs and all, of course, you can reach out to the IPMAR for any kind of the inputs or any kind of the further discussion is needed. And humble request all of you, you can visit to our various stalls for you to get some more information and idea about this entire the science what we have been talking so far. So that's it from my end. Hello.
Yeah, Vijay, thank you. Ganesh, please take it forward. Yeah. You're on mute. Ganesh, you're on mute.
Next thing is by Jaish ji to give the industry perspective, Deepak ji.
Yeah. So Jaish bhai, we have had excellent presentations from Naveen and Ganesh and Vijay. So if you could bring your industry perspective on this particular aspect. Jaish bhai?
Yes, can you please allow me to share my screen?
Shiraz, can you just do this?
So you need to click on share screen at the bottom.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, yes, yes. Jaish bhai.
Okay. So thank you, Naveen, thank you, Ganesh. See, to my industry friends, inventory may we put good amount of money in our working capital, both in terms of inventory and also in terms of book debts that we extend to our customers. And a very small fraction of it, if we deploy that for learning the modern techniques on how others are benefiting by reducing the inventory and what is possible, that has been one of the best investment that I made in my life. And I would like to share actual experience of what we had. So our sales to working capital ratio has improved from 1 to nearly 10, and our journey is taking it to 100. Now, this seems very, very improbable, etc. But I've seen actually case studies, actually examples from the industry where a Birla Group company manufacturing films has a working capital turnover of about 300 times in a year. So practically, they are working with 1 day's working capital for achieving sales, and that's just the best. So this is possible and doable. To do that, one thing of course, we need to make a lot of changes. We need to change our mindset. We need to change the way we work with customers. We maybe sometime need to change our business models, and we may need to do a lot more. So one thing we changed was from stock and sales, we went to make to order, and that immensely reduced our inventory. Also, instead of offering credit to our customers, we started offering them cash discounts, which they happily accepted. And then we made it a point that, okay, we'll give you a better price, but not the credit. And that saved us a lot of working capital. Once we are able to save inventory, a sideline, inventory, where do you keep them? You keep them in go down. Go down is go down. Remember that. Go down is go down, because what you keep there, you're not able to protect it in a manner that is easier to protect your money than protect your inventory. From obsolescence, from theft, from deterioration, etc. 100 different risks to inventory. And also to working capital, apart from inventory, investment in money, you also need to invest in the space and staff required to manage that stores. So additional cost. Also, SME has advantage of flexibility and nimbleness, change of design, change of colors, change of season, Now that nimbleness you do lose when you keep large inventory. So those were the advantage. We also standardize some parts and packing materials. So for example, we standardize the size of the box across our product, over 200 SKUs that we carry. And advantage was our packing material requirement went down drastically. So there's a small little things we learned, and I think it's really worth it to work with these experts, share their experience, learn from them, and actually in real life take the advantage of that. That's from my side. And I've seen many of my friends going through similar journey, and it's possible and doable and achievable across product life cycle. Thank you.
Jaish bhai, thank you very much. I mean, very practical approach. The real experience of the industry was reflected on the way you explained it. So thank you, Jaish bhai. So Sarfraz, you want to take some questions if there are?
It's taken me less than 5 minutes to share, but it's taken me 30 years to learn what I'm sharing. So take it seriously and actually try and implement it as possible. If I can do it, you can do it better.
Very rightly said, Jaish bhai. I am sure your years of experience, and I mean, this is a good platform where people can quickly learn from the experience of the industry as well as our panelists. So Sarfraz, do you want to take some questions and take it forward from here?
Yes, sir. We have asked, but have not received any questions so far. So would you like to direct any questions to the team, or should we conclude?
I think we can conclude if Jaish bhai has some questions, otherwise we can just conclude. Jaish bhai, you have some questions or we can conclude on this? Sarfraz?
Ji.
Conclude kar sakte ho.
Okay. So I think we'll request everyone to visit our stall, which is in hall number 5, and we also have an upcoming webinar at 4 o'clock, which is on cost of poor quality to improve your brand image and product quality. So please attend that. And yeah, that's about it, Mr. Deepak.
I think we will, do we wait till 4 o'clock? We'll take a break at 4 o'clock. We'll start because a lot of people will actually join at 4 o'clock.
Ji.
So I think we'll just take a break and then we rejoin at 4 o'clock. Yeah.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.